Ryan Vale didn't expect his morning to include catching a woman as she collapsed onto the pavement outside a crowded bakery. "Whoa, hey, I got you," he said, steadying her as her knees buckled. She was pale, her arms limp, and her breath came in shallow gasps. His 8-year-old daughter, Sadie, clutched his hand tightly. "Daddy, is she okay?" Sadie whispered, eyes wide. "I don't know, baby. Stay right here." He gently laid the woman down on the bench outside the bakery and ran back inside. "Can I get a bottle of water?" "She fainted," he said to the barista, already grabbing one off the counter before they could answer. Back outside, he twisted the cap open and knelt beside the woman. "Hey," he said softly, pressing the cool bottle to her lips. "Can you drink a little?" Her lashes fluttered and her eyes opened slowly, bright hazel, dazed. She looked around, confused, then locked eyes with him. "What happened? You fainted," he said. "Here, drink some water." She took a sip, then another, her hands trembling. "Thank you." "No problem. You scared my kid, though," he added with a quick glance at Sadie, who gave a small wave. "I'm sorry," the woman murmured, trying to sit up straighter. "I hadn't eaten." Ryan scanned her face, flawless skin, designer heels, and a silk blouse that had no business being in this part of Brooklyn. "You sure you're okay?" "I will be," she said, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. "Thank you for helping." "I'm Ryan." "And that's Sadie," he said, nodding toward his daughter. "Juliette," she said, breathless. "Juliette Nolan." He nodded, standing up and offering his hand to help her. "You need to sit a while. I think I just need to get home." She stood, but her legs wobbled. Ryan caught her again, sighing. "Okay, no. Look, my apartment's right around the corner. You're not walking anywhere like that." Juliette hesitated. "I don't want to impose, you're not. I've got a kid in a small apartment, nothing fancy." "You'll be safe." She stared at him for a second, studying his face like she wasn't used to someone offering help without strings. "All right," she said softly. "Just for a moment." He led her and Sadie down the block to their small walk-up. It was clean, a little tight, and filled with second-hand furniture, but it was home. Juliette sat softly on the worn couch while Sadie climbed into the armchair opposite her with a juice box. Ryan handed Juliette a granola bar and a banana from the kitchen. "Eat something before you pass out again." She smiled faintly and took them. "Thanks, again," he shrugged. "You're lucky I was already at the bakery. Sadie's obsessed with their chocolate muffins." "Only on Fridays," Sadie chimed in. Juliette laughed and Ryan looked at her again. Something about her didn't fit. The tailored clothes, the watch that probably cost more than his rent, the way she held herself even now, sitting on a lumpy couch in a stranger's apartment, she looked like she belonged in a magazine. "So," he said, leaning against the counter. "You from around here?" She paused. "Sort of. I grew up in New York, just not this part. Figures," he smiled. "You don't exactly blend in with the bakery crowd." Juliette's lips curved. "I was trying to." "Guess I didn't do a great job." She took another bite of the banana, then looked around the apartment. Her eyes landed on a stack of overdue bills shoved under a cookbook on the counter. Ryan noticed and quickly moved to cover them. "Sorry," he muttered. "It's okay," she said, her voice quiet. "You're a single dad." "Yeah, Sadie's mom left when she was 2. Haven't heard from her since." Juliette's gaze softened. "That must be hard." "Sometimes, but Sadie's amazing. She keeps me going." Juliette looked over at the little girl who was now humming to herself and drawing on a napkin. "She's lucky to have you." Ryan gave her a tired smile. "I try." She stood slowly, steadier now. "Thank you again. I should go. I'll walk you out." At the door, she turned to him. "Can I ask, why did you help me?" He blinked. "Because you needed help." "No one does that anymore." "Not without wanting something." "I didn't want anything," he said simply. She studied him for a long beat. "Well," she said, reaching into her purse, "at least let me give you something for the water and food." "No," Ryan interrupted. "Don't do that." "But I'm not taking your money." Juliette stared at him like she'd never heard those words before. "Okay," she said softly. "Then, can I see you again?" Ryan blinked. "Why?" She smiled. "Because I want to." He gave her a look. "You don't even know me." "Then let me get to know you." Ryan hesitated. This woman was way out of his league. He could tell, but something about the way she looked at him, not pity, not curiosity, just interest, made him nod. "Okay," she grinned. "Tomorrow," he chuckled. "Sure. But I'm broke and I've got a kid. So unless you're fine with a park and dollar pizza." "I'd love that," she said quickly. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, then walked away down the street, her heels clicking against the sidewalk. Ryan stood frozen in the doorway. Sadie peeked out behind him. "Is she your new girlfriend?" he laughed. "No, I just brought her water," Sadie grinned. "She was pretty." "Yeah," Ryan said, still staring after her. She really was. What he didn't know was that Juliette Nolan had a net worth north of $3 billion, owned half the buildings in Manhattan, and had never, not once, had someone refuse her money. And for the first time in a long time, she couldn't stop smiling. By Saturday afternoon, Ryan stood outside the deli on Myrtle Avenue, nervously checking his watch. Sadie skipped beside him, holding a half-eaten pretzel and humming a tune about turtles. The sun filtered down between the buildings, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. "You think she forgot?" Sadie asked, peering up at him. "I don't know," Ryan said, brushing a hand through his hair. "She said she'd meet us here. She seemed nice," she added, taking another bite. "She did," Ryan agreed, adjusting the strap of a backpack slung over his shoulder. Inside was a bottle of juice, a first aid kit, and a few crayons just in case. He always came prepared when Sadie was around. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop across the street. A man in a suit stepped out and opened the door. Ryan's stomach tightened as Juliette emerged, dressed in jeans and a navy t-shirt, her hair pulled into a braid that made her look younger. She crossed the street with a small smile and a paper bag in hand. "Sorry I'm late," she said, offering the bag. "I brought hot pretzels." "I figured I owed you two," Sadie grinned. "I already have one." "Then this one's for your dad," Juliette said, handing it to Ryan. He nodded, trying not to overthink where she came from or the man who had driven her. "Thanks." They walked toward the park, the three of them slipping into an easy rhythm. Sadie darted ahead when she spotted the swings, leaving Ryan and Juliette walking side by side. "So," she said, glancing at him. "You weren't kidding about the dollar pizza plan." "I keep my promises," Juliette laughed. "That's rare." He looked at her. "You always travel with a driver, only on days ending in Y," she said, then added quickly, "I wasn't sure about the area." "Right." He shoved his hands into his pockets. "So what do you actually do?" She hesitated. "I work in property. That's vague." "Intentionally," she said, looking ahead at the playground. "The truth tends to change the way people treat me." Ryan considered that but didn't press. "Fair enough, your turn," she said. "What do you do?" "Maintenance. Part-time, a couple buildings across the borough." "Is that what you wanted to do?" "No, but it keeps Sadie fed." Juliette nodded. "That's something." They reached a bench and sat as Sadie climbed onto a slide. Juliette watched her with a strange look, like she was seeing something she hadn't realized she missed. Ryan caught her expression. "You okay?" she blinked. "Yeah, just..." "I can't remember the last time I sat in a park on a Saturday." "Then you've been doing Saturdays wrong." A breeze stirred Juliette's braid and she turned to him. "You're not what I expected. Most people aren't." She opened her mouth, then paused. "Why'd you agree to see me again?" Ryan tilted his head. "Because you didn't act like I was invisible," her brow furrowed. "Has that happened?" "More than you'd guess. I fix things in the walls of condos people forget I'm in. You learn a lot being invisible." Juliette turned toward him fully. "What did you learn about me?" "You didn't try to run when you woke up in a stranger's apartment. That's either brave or reckless." She smiled faintly. "Maybe both." They watched Sadie for a few minutes, the silence between them comfortable. Juliette reached into her bag and pulled out a small book. "I brought something for her," she said, holding it out. "It was my favorite when I was her age." Ryan stared at the hardcover, beautifully bound with gold detailing. "That looks expensive." "It's a reprint," she lied smoothly. "She might like it." Sadie ran over, panting. "What's that?" "A story," Juliette said, crouching beside her. "About a girl who builds her own ship and sails across the world." "Does she fight pirates?" Sadie asked, eyes wide. "Only the mean ones." "I like her already." Juliette handed her the book, and Sadie tucked it under her arm like treasure before running back to the jungle gym. Ryan leaned back. "You're good with her." "I didn't think I would be." "Why not?" "I haven't been around kids much." "You wouldn't know it." Juliette looked at him. "You're different from everyone I know. That's not always a good thing." "It is when everyone you know only wants something from you." Ryan met her gaze, curious. "Is that common?" She looked away. More than I'd like to admit. They sat in silence again, broken only by distant laughter and the creak of the swing set. Eventually, Juliette stood. I should go. Ryan nodded and stood too. Thanks for coming. She hesitated, then reached into her back pocket and handed him a business card plain with only her name and a number. If you ever need anything. He held the card but didn't look at it. I don't want a favor. It's not a favor, she said, watching him carefully. It's a door. He didn't answer, so she added, You were kind to me when I didn't have anything to give. That matters. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked back toward the corner where the SUV waited. Sadie returned to his side, clutching the book. Is she leaving? Yeah. Will she come back? Ryan looked down at the card in his hand. I don't know. But something told him this wasn't the last he'd see of Juliette Nolan. Not by a long shot. Juliette didn't call for 5 days. Ryan told himself he didn't care. He had work orders piling up, a backed-up sink in a rent-controlled walk-up, and a daughter who needed help with a school project involving glitter, glue, and a papier-mâché volcano. He didn't have time to sit around wondering why the woman with the quiet voice and guarded eyes had vanished. But late Thursday evening, as he was scrubbing dried paint off his hands in the kitchen sink, his phone rang. He dried his fingers on a dish towel and answered without checking the caller ID. Yeah, it's Juliette, said the voice on the other end, calm but uncertain. I hope it's not too late. He leaned against the counter. It's fine, Sadie's asleep. I wasn't sure if I should call, she said, but I wanted to ask if you're free tomorrow. I'd like to take you and Sadie somewhere. Ryan hesitated. Where? There's a fall fair in Prospect Park. It's quiet. Family-friendly, I figured she might like it, Ryan considered. You want to hang out with a 6-year-old again? Actually, Juliette said, I want to see you, but she's part of the package, right? He felt something shift in his chest. Yeah. She is. Then I'll pick you up at 5, he agreed, and they hung up. He stood in the dim kitchen for a long moment, staring at the sink full of dishes, trying to ignore the way his heart was thudding. The next evening, Juliette didn't show up in a sleek SUV. She arrived in a blue sedan, modest and a little scuffed near the bumper. She wore a chunky knit sweater and jeans, her hair loose and windblown. When Ryan and Sadie stepped outside, she opened the passenger door herself. Where's the guy in the suit? Ryan asked. He's not invited tonight, she said. Sadie climbed into the back seat, already peppering her with questions. Do they have funnel cakes? Are there animals? Are you afraid of goats? Juliette laughed. I guess I'll find out. The fairground was strung with lanterns and smelled like cinnamon, apples, and roasted peanuts. Sadie ran ahead toward a tent with painted pumpkins, leaving Ryan and Juliette trailing behind. You're good at disappearing, he said. Juliette wrapped her arms around herself. I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me. I still don't know what you're doing here. You mean here in general or here with you? Both. Juliette stepped over a patch of straw, her boots crunching. I built a company from nothing. I spent 10 years pretending I had no personal life because I thought that was the price of success. But then I collapsed in front of a bakery, and some guy with paint on his jeans gave me water and told me no. Ryan raised an eyebrow. That's what did it? No, she said, smiling faintly. What did it was how I couldn't stop thinking about it afterward. He watched her carefully. I still don't get your angle. There's no angle. I'm tired of people who only want access. You didn't ask for anything. Maybe I should have, but you didn't. And that's why I'm here. Sadie came running back, a tiny pumpkin in her arms, her cheeks flushed. Can we do the hayride? Ryan looked at Juliette. Lead the way, she said. They rode in a cart filled with hay bales, pulled by a tractor that rattled and puffed smoke into the crisp air. Sadie nestled between them, pointing out scarecrows and laughing every time the cart hit a bump. When they got off, she darted toward a caramel apple stand, and Ryan followed behind her, leaving Juliette alone near the edge of the path, watching the families pass. A woman in a tailored coat stopped beside her. Juliette, Juliette turned, startled. Celia, I didn't expect to see you here. Celia glanced at Ryan and Sadie. You're with them? Yes, the other woman's brows lifted. That's unexpected. Juliette's shoulders squared. Not really. Celia gave a thin smile. Your board's still waiting on your proposal for the Midtown project. I sent it this morning, of course. Well, enjoy your evening. Celia turned and walked off, her heels clicking over the gravel. Juliette exhaled slowly. Ryan returned with 2 apples and handed her one. "Friend of yours, colleague," she said, "the kind who checks your shoes before looking at your face." He studied her. "You okay?" She nodded. "More than I expected to be." Sadie tugged his sleeve. "Can we do the Ferris wheel?" Ryan glanced at Juliette, who was already pulling out tickets. At the top of the ride, as the city glittered in the distance, Sadie leaned her head on Ryan's arm and whispered, "She should come to my birthday." Juliette turned from the view. "When is it?" "In 3 weeks," Sadie said. "And I want cupcakes with dinosaurs." Juliette smiled. "I'll bring the cupcakes." Ryan looked at her. "You don't have to, but I want to," Juliette said. The ride jerked gently as it began to descend, and Juliette looked out across the skyline. "I've spent years building towers, but this," she nodded towards Sadie, who had started humming again, "this feels real." Ryan didn't answer. He didn't know how to, but when they got off and Juliette took Sadie's hand as they walked toward the exit, he realized something had shifted. She wasn't just visiting his world anymore. She was stepping into it. Juliette stood in front of the bakery where it had all started, holding a small box of chocolate muffins and watching the door swing open and shut with the early morning crowd. She was 40 minutes early, but her nerves wouldn't let her stay still. The air was cooler now, the city sliding fully into autumn. Brown leaves skittered along the sidewalk as she glanced at her reflection in the glass. No makeup today, no driver, no assistant shadowing her every step. Just her, in a soft wool coat and a scarf that had been hand-knit by a woman in Queens she'd met at a street market. Behind her, a little voice called out, "She's here." Juliette turned just in time to see Sadie racing toward her with a paper crown askew on her head and a dinosaur sticker on her cheek. Ryan followed at a slower pace, a sweater slung over one shoulder and a paper cup in hand. Sadie stopped in front of Juliette, breathless. "You said cupcakes, but you brought muffins?" Juliette crouched to Sadie's level, presenting the box. "These are the decoys. The real cupcakes are at the community center. With frosting taller than your crown." Sadie's eyes lit up, and she took Juliette's hand without hesitation. "You're coming with us, right?" "I wouldn't miss it," Juliette said. Ryan joined them, voice low. "She's been talking about you all week." Juliette glanced at him. "I've been thinking about her, and you." He didn't respond immediately, just looked at her in a way that made her chest tighten. They walked together to the center, where a small party had already begun, streamers taped to folding chairs, a makeshift photo backdrop painted with volcanoes and stegosauruses, and a table stacked with juice boxes and paper plates. Juliette set down the box of cupcakes she'd had delivered earlier, each one meticulously frosted to resemble colorful dinosaurs. Kids swarmed the table, and Sadie beamed. As the children played, Ryan and Juliette found a quiet spot near the window, watching the chaos unfold. "You didn't have to do all this," Ryan said. "I wanted to," Juliette replied. "And not because I'm trying to impress you." "I didn't say you were. You're thinking it." "I'm thinking," he said, "that you keep surprising me." Juliette shifted slightly, her voice softer. "There's a board meeting on Monday. They want me to move to London." That pulled Ryan's gaze back to her. "Are you going?" "I was going to, before I met you." He studied her face, waiting. "I've spent years chasing things that didn't feel like anything once I caught them, but the last few weeks. Your world, it's the first time I felt like I was actually living in one." Ryan didn't speak, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "So," Juliette continued, "I turned it down, the move. I told them I'm staying, because of me, because of you, because of her. Because I want something real." He looked down at the floor, his voice quiet. "I don't have a penthouse or a second car or even health insurance half the time." "I know exactly what you have," she said. "And I want it anyway." Sadie called out from the other side of the room, holding a cupcake in one hand and waving a dinosaur balloon in the other. "Come take pictures." Juliette laughed and walked over to her, crouching beside her for a photo. Ryan watched her fit into the moment like she'd always belonged there. Later, when the children were chasing bubbles outside and the cleanup had begun, Juliette found Ryan folding a plastic tablecloth. She reached for his hand, stopping him. "Come with me." He hesitated. "Sadie's still. She's with my friend, the one I brought to help today. She'll be fine for an hour." Ryan followed her outside, past the park and down a row of quiet streets until they reached a narrow building with ivy crawling up the brick. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space was warm and open, sunlight pouring through tall windows onto hardwood floors. A kitchen with clean, modern finishes stood to the left, and a second-hand piano sat tucked in the corner. Ryan took a slow step inside. "What is this?" "I bought it last week," Juliette said. "It's for you." "And Sadie?" He turned to face her sharply. "No, that's too much, I know," she said. "That's why I'm not giving it to you. I'm renting it to you for $1 a year." He shook his head. "Juliette, I'm not asking you to take charity. I'm asking you to let me into your life, for real. Not as your billionaire friend, as the woman who wants to be with you." He stared at her, every emotion flickering in his eyes at once: disbelief, hesitation, gratitude, fear. "You don't even know what you're signing up for," he said finally. "I know I want late nights with takeout and glitter-covered kitchen counters. I want to teach Sadie how to play piano and fall asleep next to someone who doesn't care about my portfolio." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You're serious about this?" "I've never been more serious about anything." Ryan looked around the room again, then back at her. "I don't have a ring, or a plan, or anything that could match this. You have everything I've ever wanted," she said. "That's more than enough." He reached for her then, pulling her into his arms and kissing her slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of a life he never thought he'd have. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. So, he smiled. "We'll take it." Later that evening, after Sadie had fallen asleep on the couch of their new home with cupcake frosting on her cheek, Ryan stood on the balcony with Juliette. Below them, the city stretched out loud, alive, sprawling. "Kind of wild," he said quietly. "How everything changed because of one bottle of water." Juliette slipped her hand into his. "No, everything changed because you were kind when you didn't have to be." He glanced at her, the skyline casting gold across her skin. "What happens now?" She smiled against his shoulder. "Whatever we want." And for the first time in his life, Ryan believed it. 3 months later, Ryan stood in the dim hallway of the building he used to maintain, his hands buried in the pockets of his worn jacket. The familiar scent of floor polish and radiator heat clung to the air. He waited while a tenant in 3C jiggled her key and muttered under her breath. He wasn't there to fix anything. "Ryan," a voice behind him made him turn. Carla, the building's manager, stood with a clipboard and a confused expression. "Didn't expect to see you back here. I left my toolbox here a while ago. Thought I'd pick it up." She nodded, eyes narrowing slightly. "You doing all right?" He nodded. "Yeah. Better than all right." He retrieved the red metal box from a tiny closet in the basement, not because he needed the tools anymore. Most of his days were spent helping Juliette with a new outreach initiative they'd started together, but because it felt like closing a door. Not slamming it shut, but gently, finally, back outside, the snow had started to fall, light flurries brushing the streetlights. He walked to the corner where a black sedan idled by the curb. The driver wasn't in a suit this time, just a winter coat and gloves, nodding politely as Ryan climbed in. Juliette turned toward him from the backseat, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Did you get it?" He held up the box. "Last piece." She tucked her hand into his, her fingers warm. "Then let's go." They drove in silence for a few minutes, the low hum of the engine and the soft jazz from the radio filling the space. The city passed in streaks of gold and silver, holiday lights in shop windows casting flickers against the glass. Juliette leaned her head back. "Do you ever miss it? What, fixing pipes until midnight?" "No," she said, smiling. "The simplicity." Ryan looked at her. "You think our life isn't simple?" She turned toward him. "We live in a brownstone with a piano and a kid who's decided she's writing her first novel. You run a program that teaches underprivileged teens how to repair and renovate old homes, and I'm funding 10 new community centers in neighborhoods no one else will touch. It's not simple." "It's good," he said. She nodded. "It's very good." They pulled up in front of the townhouse, now fully theirs, and Ryan carried the toolbox inside, setting it down just inside the door. The lights were already dimmed, and soft music played from the living room. Sadie was curled up on the rug with a notebook and a purple pen, her tongue poking out as she wrote. Juliette crouched beside her. How's chapter 5? Great, Sadie said without looking up. The dinosaur queen finally gets her crown back. Juliette kissed the top of her head. Sounds like a happy ending, Sadie grinned. The best kind. Ryan watched them for a moment, the way they fit together, his daughter and the woman who had once fainted on a sidewalk and turned his life upside down in the best possible way. Later that night, after Sadie was asleep and the house had gone quiet, Juliette poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Ryan. They sat on the couch beneath a soft blanket, the snow now falling steadily outside. "You've changed everything," she said quietly. He looked at her. "I didn't do it alone. I didn't think I wanted a family," she said. "I used to think love would distract me from everything I was trying to build. And now, I still want to build things, but not alone." He set his glass down and reached into the pocket of his jacket, pulling out a small box. "I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks trying to figure out how to do this the right way." Juliette blinked slowly. "You're not serious." He opened the box. A simple ring, no diamonds, just a band of gold with a small engraving inside, 1 bottle of water. "I don't have a speech," he said. "But I want this, I want you, I want everything we've built, and I want to keep building." She stared at the ring for a long moment before taking it from the box and sliding it onto her finger. "You didn't need a speech." "That a yes?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She leaned in and kissed him, slow and sure. "Of course it's a yes." They sat together in silence, the kind that only comes when there's nothing left to prove, only something to hold. Outside, the snow blanketed the city, muffling the world in softness. 3 weeks later, they married in a rooftop greenhouse overlooking the river, with Sadie tossing flower petals in a trail so thick the aisle disappeared beneath them. Juliette wore a dress stitched with tiny vines and leaves, and Ryan wore a suit that didn't quite fit right but made her tear up the moment she saw him. There were no reporters, no headlines. Just 100 people they'd helped, taught, or known from the beginning, people who'd seen Ryan fix leaky faucets or watched Juliette sit on the floor beside a child learning to read. After the ceremony, Sadie stood between them and held both their hands. "I want to write about this," she said. "In my book." Juliette looked down at her. "What will you call it?" Sadie thought for a second. "The day everything got really, really good," Ryan laughed. "That's a pretty solid title." They danced under strings of fairy lights, Juliette barefoot by the end of the night, Ryan spinning her in lazy circles while Sadie fell asleep with her head on a borrowed coat. No limousines. No tabloid flashbulbs. Just warmth and laughter, and the quiet certainty that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. And for the rest of their days, through every storm, every celebration, and every ordinary Tuesday, that never changed.